Number 9. Truls Hellevik Byford, Dolphin Explosive, Decompression November 5th, 1983. On November 5th, 1983, at 4:00 a.m., an explosive decompression accident occurred on the Byford Dolphin's semi-submersible drilling rig while it was operating in the Frigg gas field in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea. 4 saturation divers were inside a pressurized chamber system on the rig's deck that was connected by a trunk to a diving bell, pressurized to 9 atmospheres, roughly equivalent to being 80 meters underwater. The divers were Edwin Arthur Coward, British age 35, Roy P. Lucas, British age 38, Bjorn Gjæver Bergersen, Norwegian age 29, and Truls Hellevik, Norwegian age 34. And they were assisted by 2 dive tenders, William Crammond, British age 32, and Martin Saunders. A clamp holding the trunk sealed was opened before the trunk had been depressurized, causing both chambers to instantly drop from 9 atmospheres to 1 atmosphere. Truls Hellevik, who was in the process of closing the interior trunk door, was forced through the crescent-shaped opening measuring 60 centimeters long, created by the jammed door, resulting in gross dismemberment and expulsion of his internal organs. The 3 other divers, Coward, Lucas, and Bergersen, died where they sat as dissolved gases in their blood came out of solution so rapidly that fat precipitated and stopped their circulation. The explosive rush of air sent the heavy diving bell flying across the platform, killing dive tender William Crammond and critically injuring Martin Saunders, who was the only survivor. Forensic pathologists published their findings in the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology in June 1988, documenting the extreme effects of the explosive decompression on the victims. A 2008 investigation found that faulty equipment, not human error, was to blame for the accident, absolving those initially blamed and leading the Norwegian government to pay compensation to the families in 2009. The incident led to significant improvements in commercial diving safety standards worldwide, including the mandatory implementation of interlock mechanisms on all bell systems, 1 month after the accident, and stricter safety regulations for offshore diving operations. Number 8. Yuri Lipsky Blue Hole, Dahab Nitrogen Narcosis. Death April 28, 2000. Yuri Lipsky, a 22-year-old Russian-Israeli diving instructor, died on April 28, 2000 at the Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt, after an uncontrolled descent to a depth of 115 meters. Lipsky carried a video camera, which filmed the descent, showing him initiate a voluntary uncontrolled descent, eventually landing on the seafloor at 115 meters, where he panicked, removed his regulator, and tried to fill his buoyancy compensator but was unable to rise. Upon his arrival at the location in April 2000, Lipsky reportedly spoke to veteran diving instructor Tarek Omar, who told him he would need 2 weeks training to dive to the archway. But Lipsky only had a couple of days in town and attempted the dive by himself, against Omar's advice. Lipsky had just 1 tank full of air, whereas technical divers are better served by multiple tanks filled with Trimix, a combination of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium that reduces narcosis. At 115 meters, he would have been subject to severe nitrogen narcosis, which may have impaired his judgment. At the request of his mother, his body was recovered the next day by famed recovery diver Tarek Omar. 2 days after the recovery, Omar found Lipsky's helmet camera at a depth of 115 meters, and despite being designed to sustain only 75 meters, the camera was still working. The footage was played with Lipsky's mother present, and Omar expressed regret that his mother would have the footage of her own son drowning, saying if he had known the footage existed, he would have flooded the camera. The existence of the video footage has made it one of the most well-known diving deaths in the world. The Blue Hole dive site is reputed to have the most diver fatalities in the world. Number 7. Dave Shaw Bushman's whole-body recovery death January 8, 2005. Dave Shaw died on January 8, 2005, while attempting to recover the body of Dion Dreyer from Bushman's Hole in South Africa. At a depth of 270 meters, Shaw recorded his dive with an underwater camera, which allowed researchers to determine that he suffered from respiratory issues due to the high pressure. Shaw ran into difficulties when the body unexpectedly began to float, as within his dry suit, Dreyer's corpse had turned into a soap-like substance called adiposury, which floats. Shaw started work to free Dreyer's body, but, as prearranged, aborted the effort when he had not succeeded after 6 minutes. Ascending, he became entangled in the line previously used to mark the body, and stopped breathing about 22 minutes into the dive. A postmortem concluded that an excessive buildup of carbon dioxide caused the blackout and death of rebreather diver Dave Shaw, with the breathing impairment, combined with the increased activity of recovering the body, leading to a critical buildup of carbon dioxide over a period of 10 minutes. His backup diver Don Shirley shot up, already violently ill with decompression sickness, with a dive slate bearing the words, "Dave's not coming back," and after more than 12 hours in the water, he was left with permanent injuries affecting his balance. On the 12th January 2005, while others were recovering Shaw's technical equipment, they discovered the bodies of both Dreyer and Shaw had floated up close to the surface, with divers about 20 to 25 meters deep when they saw the bodies. It appeared that Shaw's equipment got entangled with Dreyer's diving gear, with the gear from both bodies tangled together when they surfaced. A medical study published in Aviation Space and Environmental Medicine in February 2007 examined the fatal respiratory failure during Shaw's technical rebreather dive at extreme pressure. Number 6. Agnes Malauka Tank Cave, South Australia, death. February 27, 2011. Agnes Malauka died in a cave diving accident in Tank Cave near Tantanoola in the southeast of South Australia on February 27, 2011. At the age of 29, she was an Australian technical diver, underwater photographer, author, maritime archaeologist, and cave explorer who had gained international recognition for penetrating deeper than previous explorers into cave systems. On the day of the accident, she parted company with her diving group to explore a tight restriction that required going solo. She ran out of air while diving in the confined space of Tank Cave, a complex underwater system with over 8 kilometers of maze-like passages. Malauka was reported missing at approximately 1:45 p.m. on Sunday, February 27, 2011. South Australian police coordinated the recovery operation and requested expert cave divers to assist because of the complexities of the almost 8-kilometer stretch of twisting underwater passages. Dr. Richard Harris, an anesthetist and experienced cave diver who was a friend of Malauka, led the team of expert cave divers who recovered her body. Her body was located approximately 500 to 600 meters from the cave entrance. The recovery team retrieved her body on March 2, 2011, after expert divers navigated the hazardous terrain using video equipment to map the recovery route. The official cause of death was confirmed as drowning due to asphyxiation from exhaustion of her breathing gas, with contributing factors including navigational disorientation in the cave's convoluted layout, and the risks of solo penetration of tight spaces. Number 5. Kazim Ali Jr. Paria Pipeline Delta P disaster, February 25, 2022. Kazim Ali Jr., age 36, was the son of LMCS Managing Director Kazim Ali Sr. and worked as one of 5 divers employed by Land and Marine Contracting Services Limited to complete maintenance work at Paria Fuel Trading Company's Pointe-à-Pierre facility in Trinidad. On February 25, 2022, at around 3:00 p.m., Ali and 4 other divers were performing maintenance on a 30-inch underwater pipeline at Berth 6, Pointe-à-Pierre, at a depth of 18 meters when all 5 were suddenly sucked into the pipeline. The tragedy was caused by a differential pressure event known as Delta P, a vacuum within the pipeline that sucked anything in the immediate area inside under great pressure as soon as the divers opened it. Christopher Boudram, the 5th diver, survived by crawling through the pipe for approximately 3 hours until he was pulled from the pipe by Michael Kerbin, the son of fellow diver Fizal Kerbin. Audio recordings recovered from a GoPro camera showed that all the men survived being sucked into the pipe and were heard praying and comforting each other. Rescue divers and families made multiple dives and reported hearing sounds deeper within the pipe, with LMCS workers knocking on the pipeline and receiving responses from the trapped divers knocking back, before reportedly being stopped by Paria officials. On the night of February 27, 2022, Paria held a news conference indicating it had changed its operation from rescuing the divers to recovering their bodies, based on advice from experts including the Coast Guard. Ali's body was recovered on February 28, 2022, 3 days after the incident, and a pathology report indicated he was possibly alive for up to 39 hours after being sucked into the pipeline. A government-appointed commission of inquiry concluded that the deaths were due to gross and criminal negligence, recommending that Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited be tried for corporate manslaughter. In September 2024, charges were laid against Paria, LMCS, Paria's general manager Mushtaq Mohammed, terminal operations manager Colin Piper, and LMCS director Kazim Ali Sr., the father of the deceased diver. Number 4. Richard Patton Jacobs Well Falls Chimney Death, November 23, 1983. On November 23, 1983, Richard Patton, a 22-year-old Southwest Texas State University student, and his companion Clark McConnell entered Jacobs Well, a water-filled cave in Hays County, Texas, at approximately 8:30 p.m. Both divers were equipped with standard scuba gear and lights and were members of an advanced diving class at the university. At about 90 feet depth, they encountered a metal grate that had been installed in 1979 to block a dangerous passage, but the grate was missing. The two divers removed their tanks and proceeded through the narrow passage, pushing the tanks ahead and breathing through the hoses. Patton's tank became jammed in the passage and had to be abandoned, forcing both divers to share the remaining air supply using buddy breathing as they retreated toward the entrance. During their ascent while sharing air, the divers mistakenly entered a false chimney, a deceptive passage that appeared to lead to the surface but was actually a dead end. McConnell managed to find the correct passage and escape to the surface, but Patton remained trapped in the false chimney as their air ran out. Wimberley Rescue and fire units, along with Hays County deputies, arrived within 15 minutes after McConnell surfaced and raised the alarm. The decision was made to wait until Thursday morning to recover Patton's body, which was found jammed at the top of the false chimney by divers from San Marcos. The instructor leading the recovery effort, Don Dibble, was also Patton's advanced diving instructor at the university, and both victims were described as extremely experienced and intelligent divers working toward instructor certification. Number 3. Richard Walker, MS Wildrake, Diving Bell Hypothermia, Death, August 1979. On the night of August 7, 1979, 32-year-old Richard Arthur Walker and 28-year-old Victor Francis Gael, Jr. were lowered to a depth of 485 feet in the diving bell of the MS Wildrake in the East Shetland Basin of the North Sea to work on reattaching a single anchor leg. Mooring system to its base, both American commercial divers had been living in saturation since July 29, 1979, and this was their 30th bell dive from the Wildrake. Shortly after 02:20 on August 8th, Walker, who was working outside the bell, discovered that the bell had become separated from its main lift wire at a depth of over 160 meters and was hanging at an angle by its life support umbilical. Walker reported the emergency and rejoined Gael inside the bell, where they closed and sealed the inside door. A rescue attempt was launched involving the diving support vessel Stina Welder, whose divers had to attach a guide wire to the stranded bell so the Wildrake's crane could lift it. At 07, 55 rescue diver Phil Casey Smith saw Walker and Gael giving him thumbs up through the porthole, but later observed that their movements had become very frantic. At 19:37, the bell was finally lifted out of the ocean and docked to the Wildrake saturation system, where Dr. Morven White examined Walker and Gael and determined that they were dead. Postmortems conducted in Aberdeen determined that both divers died of hypothermia. On August 9, 1979, Department of Energy inspectors and police boarded the Wildrake to investigate the accident, and Inspector Roy Giles found multiple safety violations and evidence of negligence. The accident resulted in extensive subsequent litigation and led to important safety changes in the diving industry. Number 2. Stephen Millett Mount Gambier Cave Diving Accident, May 28, 1973. Stephen Millett died on May 28, 1973, during a cave diving incident at a flooded sinkhole known as the Shaft near Mount Gambier in South Australia. He was one of 4 recreational scuba divers who lost their lives that day, the others being his sister Christine Millett, Gordon Roberts, and John Bockerman. The divers explored beyond their planned limits without a continuous guideline, became lost in the underwater cavern, and eventually exhausted their breathing air and drowned. Stevens' torch and camera were found at a depth of 225 feet at the base of the rock pile, but his body was discovered under an overhang at only 50 feet. After the accident, Stevens' brother Glenn Millott returned to the water with a spare tank and descended to 225 feet, where he found Stevens' equipment amid disturbed silt and near-zero visibility. An ambulance arrived at the sinkhole while Glenn was conducting his search dive, and by the time surviving divers surfaced, they knew they were looking for bodies rather than survivors. Police initiated a search of the cave on May 29, 1973, the day after the accident, but the brief operation found no bodies and was described by Chief Inspector Wallace Budd as a learn-as-you-go exercise. Stephen Millett's body was not recovered until January 22, 1974, when police divers found it floating under a ledge at 50 feet depth and towed it out for identification through dental records. The coroner concluded that the four divers overstayed their bottom time, ran out of air, and died of hypoxia, with autopsy evidence of diatom residue in Stephen's lung tissue indicating drowning. The incident led to the formation of the Cave Divers Association of Australia, later in 1973, the development of the South Australian Police Underwater Recovery Squad, and restrictions on access to cave diving venues in Australia. Number 1. Gianluca Benedetti Decunu Candu Maldives Cave. Death, May 15, 2026. Gianluca Benedetti was the vessel captain and diving instructor who managed diving operations aboard the MV Duke of York, a live-aboard vessel carrying a group of 20 Italians on a scientific research expedition. On May 14, 2026, at approximately 11 in the morning, Benedetti entered the Decunu Candu cave system near Alimatha Island in Vavu Atoll, along with 4 other Italian divers. The dive took place in a deep underwater cave environment at depths which exceeded the standard recreational diving limit of 30 meters, with the cave system reported at depths between 50 and 60 meters. When the divers did not resurface at noon as expected, their vessel began searching for them, and by 1:30 in the afternoon, when no one had returned, the MV Duke of York notified Maldivian authorities. Benedetti's body was the first to be recovered at 6:13 in the evening on May 14th. Found from a depth of 60 meters in the first chamber of the cave close to the entrance. He was found with an empty air tank along with an empty decompression tank of nitrox that he had brought as a decompression gas. The incident claimed the lives of all 5 Italian divers and became the deadliest diving accident ever recorded in the Maldives. On Saturday, Sergeant First Class Mohammed Mahodi, 43, of the MNDF Coast Guard died during a recovery dive, and the MNDF suspended the operation. The remaining 4 bodies were successfully recovered on May 19th and May 20th, 26 by a recovery team that included 3 Finnish technical cave divers mobilized by Divers Alert Network Europe. The Maldives suspended the operating license of the live-aboard vessel Duke of York pending investigation, citing that the vessel was required to have a dive school permit to carry out expeditions, which it did not possess.